Tomorrow's hearing, Dr. Ford submitted prepared remarks to the committee in which she details the incident when Kavanaugh and his friend assaulted her. She says, quote, "I believed he was going to rape me. I tried to yell for help. When I did, Brett put his hand over my mouth to stop me from screaming. This was what terrified me the most and has had the most lasting impact on my life." She goes on to say, "I truly wish I could provide detailed answers to all the questions that have been and will be asked about how I got to the party, where it took place, and so forth. I don't have all the answers. The details about that night that bring me here today are ones I will never forget. They have been seared into my memory and have haunted me episodically as an adult." Well, we're back with our panel, Jonathan Lemire, Yamiche Alcindor, Mike Murphy, and Fatima Goss-Graves. Let me go to Mike Murphy. You were trying to ask the question, but go for it. Your statement.
Oh, no, I'm pushing back a little bit on the whole concept of anonymous accusations. I mean, the women who are brave enough, and it's incredibly difficult to come forward, ought to be respected and ought to be heard. But I've been in politics for 30 years, and I know that an anonymous accusation that instantly gets sprayed over the media and instantly believed by a lot of people can often come close to a smear. So while it's difficult, I would encourage whoever sent the letter into the Gardner staff in Colorado that they owe it to the country in the process to come forward.
Anonymous do you think Governor Gardner like was wrong to share it?
Horrible.
Or you think he's a Republican
member?
I
think it was leaked, not officially released. I think. I'm not sure. I just saw it before we went on the air. But for that to be considered seriously, and it might have to be, I think the accuser has to come forward.
Fatima, one thing, and you're the expert on this. Unfortunately, there has to be experts because this happens. There's such a pattern to this latest thing. Yeah. And anything could be untrue, but all these 4 cases now seem to suggest a guy who drank a lot, especially in his teenage years, 17 to 18, into Yale, freshman year, and then further now with this latest evidence back as recently as 20 years ago, 1998, when he's a full-grown adult, and a calm, regular person who women liked, respected women, did all the right things in the office, but when he had a few too many, he became this other guy.
And
that's all the reporting.
One of the things that we know is that sometimes people can present one way with a set of people, their friends, their families at work, and very differently with other people. And that's one of the things we've had to come to grips with over the last year with the Me Too movement, as more and more people whose conduct has come finally to light. So if there was an FBI investigation or any sort of serious neutral investigation, they would be asking questions of the people around them who knew them then. They'd be asking what their behavior was like when he was drunk.
That's a great thing. We keep getting petitions from dozens and dozens of people saying, nicest guy in the world. Who's putting together these petitions?
But you're also getting actually on the record under penalty of perjury, people saying this account happened. I'm willing to take a lot of risk. And Mike talked about why are people doing some anonymous ones where you see what has happened, this sort of bullying and shaming and blaming of people who've actually come out on the record. I'm so grateful that Christine Blasey Ford is actually coming and showing up tomorrow, even after she has been smeared by the President of the United States and everyone else over the last week.
Did you read her statement? She said, I'm terrified.
It's powerful. And she has a lot of people who are standing with her, but it's going to be tough.
In prepared remarks, which he is scheduled to deliver tomorrow, Judge Kavanaugh described his time in high school, writing, "I spent most of my time in high school focused on academics, sports, church, and service. But I was not perfect in those days, just as I am not perfect today. I drank beer with my friends, usually on weekends. Sometimes I had too many." Well, it comes after he said this on Fox the other night.
Was there ever a time that you drank so much that you couldn't remember what happened the night before?
No, that never happened. I was focused on trying to be number 1 in my class. And being captain of the varsity basketball team, and doing my service projects, going to church. The vast majority of the time I spent in high school was studying or focused on sports.
Well, according to the Washington Post, that choir boy image you just heard does not match the description of some who knew Kavanaugh at the time. According to one woman who told the Post she was friends with Kavanaugh in college and drank with him, Kavanaugh was a sloppy drunk and drank more than a lot of people. He'd end up slurring his words, stumbling. It's not credible for him to say that he has had no memory lapses in the nights that he drank to excess. Let me go to Yamiche. You know, in the Watergate days, I remember the phrase limited modified hangout, where you admit everything short of criminality. So he says, I drank a lot of beer. I said things I cringe at today, but I didn't commit any crimes. It seems like he's do some preventing defense here, getting ready, pre-gaming the fact that there'll be a lot of testimony like this.
Well, Brett Kavanaugh has also said that he didn't do any of this sexually inappropriate behavior because he was a virgin during high school and many years after. So there's this idea that Brett Kavanaugh is really crafting this image of himself and saying, look at all the things that I've accomplished. The issue, of course, is that all the women who have accused him, or at least 2 or 3 of the women that have accused him, are very, very credible women who have had federal jobs, who have had to go through clearances. I've talked to people who are close with Professor Ford, and they say this is someone who's a psychologist, who's very smart, who understands what it means to remember things, and that wouldn't make up false accusations just out of nowhere. So while Brett Kavanaugh is saying I'm very credible, his accusers are also saying I'm very credible. So tomorrow's hearing is going to be really tough, I think, for a lot of people to watch and weigh which person you should agree with. But I go back to the president. I think the president is going to be all about who looks like someone who's winning. President Trump is all about winners and losers. And if Brett Kavanaugh goes in there and doesn't seem as though he's going to be aggressive, doesn't seem as though he's going to be someone who's going to fight tooth and nail, who maybe even has to go after a little bit these accusers, the president's not going to be impressed with Brett Kavanaugh, and that could mean that he would pull his nomination.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.